Hello, how's everybody doing? Hope you're all doing well and that you're doing fine in the semester and everything's going fine for you. Again, if you ever have any question on this class, please do send me an email. I'll be happy to hear from you and we can see whatever the issue might be and try to work that out. Um, in this talk, I'm going to go over entry strategies for international entrepreneurs. A lot of times when companies or individuals are thinking about moving into a country, uh, there are different ways that you can approach that. And the same holds true for like multinational corporations or all the way down to much smaller ventures. But a lot that depends on what you want to do and how you think you, and also of course the local legislation. So we'll get into that a little bit. Please do call up the slides for this talk. It's right in the module there, so and it helps to follow along with the slides as you hear listen to this. On slide the second one there, you see these first mover advantages, and really a lot of the impetus toward going in a new market may be that you decide or believe or determine that you're the first one to do that, that you have a product that's new to that market or the market's never seen what you have to offer, or there's an innovation that you might be bringing to an existing set of products and services that exist in a country, but you might be able to do it in a little different way that's more effective, or they might find somehow apply what you're doing to that market. There are clear advantages to first movers, as you see there. You have you're there first, and so while and this is a classic first mover kind of chart where you have that window of opportunity where you get a lot of benefits from being there first. No one else has what you have. So because of the newness, the uniqueness, and the lack of competition, you can build a pretty good market share is the concept. And then you go along and as other people see, other companies see what you're doing, and they think, well, that's a good business. I could do that too. And also that other company or that other person has gone through a lot of pain of the startup and kind of clear and done a lot of the mistakes that could be made. So you kind of jump in there, understanding you're not going to get those first mover advantages, but you don't have a lot of downfalls, etc. either. And so you ride that roll up until you get onto the acquirer's advantage, where people, other bigger companies want to buy those companies and kind of absorb them into some kind of conglomerate or something like that. The more recent thinking is that this traditional bell-shaped curve on first mover advantage, usually you go up like that, then you lose the advantages, etc., and you end up having declining profits, etc. Is been much affected by the internet and by globalization in the area of that the whole thing's become shorter. So it used to have a first mover advantage that would last quite a long time. Now the first mover advantage doesn't last very long at all, and it may be just a matter of days, weeks, months, no longer than a year, where other companies can see what you're doing and immediately jump in there and try to take away your perceived advantages, while not making those same mistakes you may have made to get going. So sometimes it takes a lot of guts to be a first mover, and a lot of companies will say, well, I'll just wait 1 second and see what happens, then jump in there, because the risk and blocks and all those kind of things to get in there are not as great as they used to be, particularly based on internet access and globalization. Let's look at this next slide. I'm not going to go into this too much. It's a complex slide that I made up just to kind of show you where the capability and source of competitive advantage. The competitive advantage is very important, of course, in any company, any business. You always want to see, how can I win? How am I going to beat my competition? And what can I do that they're not doing? Because that's what people really pay for, is something that's unique and different. Classic example of like flying on an airplane. If you're flying an airplane from Miami to Los Angeles, every airplane's offering the same thing, a seat on the airplane. So your differentiation isn't that great in terms of what the real product is. So they try to do a lot of other things, and in an airplane's case, they don't. They only compete on price and treating you less badly than maybe the other ones do. But everybody gets treated poorly, and everyone is hit for about the same amount of money. And so because it's a real commodity, that thing. So then you have certain airlines that really try to do something really different, and they can make a difference. But often, the dominating factor in airline travel is price. I'm going to suffer through something for 4 or 5 hours, get there, I want to do it as cheaply as possible. In your kind of companies, you're going to be different, because you're going to think, how can I really come up with something very unique and different that people want to buy this thing? So these are the kind of things. You have the resource-based, asset-based, and competency-based competitive advantages. and then the areas in which you might find them in research and development, procurement, manufacturing, market sales, distribution, and general management. And as you look across those, I'm not going to test you in detail on this or like that, so don't. But I mean, it's just something good for you to have when you're looking at how can I build competitive advantage. It's going to be like this. It's going to be on your resources, on your assets, on your competencies, and along in these lines. I mean, this isn't fully comprehensive, but it's pretty close. That this is where you're going to build it. And also, when you're analyzing your competitors, there you look, kind of stick them into this grid and say, well, what do they have in resource? What do they have in assets? What are their competencies? And then along these lines here, and you'll be able to see how you stack up and match up against them, and if you can win. So it's a nice little chart to have. The next slide is on entry options and forms, and there aren't that many different ones, and these are they. So you have wholly owned subsidiaries, acquisitions, joint ventures, a series of things like agent, distributor, rep offices, and then these license and franchises. And the way you look at these as a company is you weigh them in consideration of the benefits they bring to you, the cost, the feasibility, and the risk. It's a very strategic decision. And again, when you go back and use your principles of strategy that you saw in the first couple lectures and the strategy formation process that we're kind of going through week by week, you can see how these things fit into your overall company strategy. Again, to highlight, when you look at things like this, you're looking at the cost benefit of things, the feasibility, can it be done, and what the risks are, and you kind of factor those things into your decision, and how that might affect what you're trying to sell or do. On the next slide, you're going to see the entry options and forms again listed, and so a little commentary. I'll give you a quick comment on these different things. Now, and this is important, so you should know this because it should factor into your thinking. A wholly owned subsidiary, what does that mean? That means that when you're in that other country and you own the whole entire process that's there. That can often mean building something, creating something, manufacturing something, creating the facility, opportunity, everything you need in order to run your own business. The good thing about a wholly owned subsidiary is it has complete control over the operations. That way you have no partners, you have no one locally that might disrupt your business or affect you in a way. But the downside is it's very costly because it takes a while to build. You've got to go through all the bureaucracy and government structures and other things that tend to stand in your way or challenge you from setting up your wholly owned subsidiary. And then you need to allocate a lot of resources. You got to either transfer people you have to there or hire people there. You got to manage that structure completely. You've got to be also concerned about your home office, etc., where you come from. You've got to find your suppliers, your supplies. You've got to get an entire workforce, and you have to deal with all the different cultural and logistical issues that are in that country yourself, because you've set up this wholly owned, or your company set up this wholly owned subsidiary. It's all yours, with the pluses and the minuses, all the good things, all the negative things, and it usually takes some time to hit market, to build what you need to build, and also to approach the market and be successful. Now, an acquisition can end up being a wholly owned subsidiary, but the difference is that you buy something really quickly. So what happens is that you see something, or your company sees something you like, and you buy it. Now, that has immediate impact on your ability to approach the market, because you're buying an existing company that's already working. The downside is you may not really know accurately how to determine the price. You may not be aware of all the situations they are. You might even not be aware that they have major legal issues, even though you've done your due diligence. But it's sometimes difficult in different countries to be totally aware of everything that's going on with that company. Why are they selling in the first place? What's making them sell? Now, you may go the other way around. You might approach them and you pick them and you say, I want that company. We want that company. It's going to cost us more than we'd like to pay, but we really want it. So you make them an overwhelming offer, and you've done all your due diligence and research, and that often works quite well. You acquire buildings, manufacturing, whatever that company has. You acquire their people, you acquire their technology, you acquire their know-how, and you acquire their client base. All good things. You flip them around the other way, they can also be negatives. You have all their people. Maybe you don't want them. You have their facilities. Maybe they're old and outdated. You have their client base. Maybe you want to shift it towards the client base that you need to have in your home country. But all those things you think about and put a strategic decision around. The key thing being you have it now, and so it just cuts through the time area. A joint venture is a case where you come in and you have a local partner and you partner on this business. Joint ventures are many times the way that companies enter markets, and that's for a few reasons. One is that many countries insist on joint venture entrance into their economy. They say we don't want just people to come in here and take advantage of us. They want to create capability as well by creating jobs, creating know-how, etc. So they partner you. And sometimes it's very political. You may, in many countries, you'll try to get in there and say, yeah, great, we have a partner for you, and then you realize it's related to somebody in the government is related somehow. So it's like a benefit that they're being provided because of their local connections, etc. That happens all the time. So you really have to be careful on your joint venture partners on who you get, and often companies do that as a necessity. Although many times companies feel it's a good idea, because what do you get? You bring concept is you bring your strengths into the equation. You acquire their strengths, which are usually market share, ongoing business, local knowledge, people, all processes, and a business that's been going for some time that you can evaluate, and also connections. Maybe you think, what, I don't like the fact this guy is related, nephew of the president, but he's a nephew of the president, and so it helps us get ahead and cut through a lot of the red tape, which is often very true. Now I have to say that only rarely do joint ventures endure over time. The most of the time, somewhere between 50 and 70%. You look after 5, 6, 7 years, and the joint venture is not working. And I'll give you a quick list of reasons why that is. This is not so much for your test, but it's good for you to know. And when you're thinking about international entrepreneurship, is that often the people that originally did the joint venture have moved on by then. They did the deal and then now doing something else. So new people, or after 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 10 years, there are new people involved. They don't have the same vision. They don't have the same investment. They don't have the same motivation that the original people had to do this deal. They may not even remember what it was, or it might even be documented that well in the corporate history. So they have different ways. And a new person comes in, I have something different. They're also the local partner. Often the joint ventures are created like on a 51-49 basis, where the 51% is on local, the 49 is on the foreign, but they say, well, but you get a management contract. In other words, you only own 49% of the company, but you can manage it, and it's all documented. But in fact, you're only the 49% owner. So over time, the strength of that 51% can actually vote you out of a lot of your benefits, and that happens quite a bit. So you see, and then so the main thing is you just have a divergence of goals after a amount of time. Maybe the original goals were obscure and not being completely forthcoming, but they do diverge over time, and that creates disruption and difficulty within the company. Again, you may be forced to joint venture, but you have to go in with your eyes wide open that it won't. I mean, it almost for sure won't last. So you have to have contingency plans and be planning, tweaking, and moving along, and doing something different, and having a plan B for when this thing isn't quite as positively effective as you initially thought. Okay, so the other things are agent, distributor, rep office. These are nice first steps to get into a market. They're very cheap ways. You can, I was a representative in various countries in Latin America, and it's a great way to go. If you have a small office, a couple people, you can be pulled out or go bigger anytime you want. It's a good first step, and depending on what kind of business you're in, it can be very effective. What you can't do is a bunch of things that are usually limited or prohibited legally because by the charter of what you're doing. Say you're a rep office, you can't make loans if you're a rep office at a bank. You can talk about loans, but somebody else is actually making loans back at your head office, etc. So usually limitations on what an agent, a distributor, a rep office can do. However, as a salesperson, as a business developer type concept, it works very well, and it's a good first step. It's good for sales, and it's a low cost, low level legal capability. Everybody understands exactly what you're doing. What you can't do is expand to that kind of level where you're doing manufacturing or a lot of certain types of deals that may be prohibited by the legislation governing these kind of things. And then finally, you have licenses and franchises. This is where a company authorizes a local company to sell or even produce or even manufacture on their behalf. So you might be like a tractor company, and there's a local company that sells your tractors. You might be a car company, and there's a local company that assembles them or maybe even makes certain parts, and they sell. So These often work out well, and they can be over a long term good. And what happens is the ones that work out well are examples where the company and the head office, maybe let's call it the U.S., they have a great product. They're really not interested in getting down and dirty on a local level to sell their product. They're perfectly happy to say, here's the product, you sell it, you distribute it, you tweak it, you make sure. So the local company does all the local client growth, the marketing, the all sorts of things, and what they do is they buy the product at a certain price from the head office, and after that is theirs. On the head office side, they're thinking, great, I made a sale, done. I don't have to worry about all the other things. They do have reputational risk, of course, and we can still got their name hammered on the thing, but it's a good way to go. And of course, franchises, it's a huge thing even in all across the world, where Subway or all sorts of different, McDonald's, all these different companies, you can buy their franchises in different countries and manage the business that way. Again, you have to follow the rules and regulations of the franchise. But for many of a franchisee, that's a way to get in business. You have the brand, you have the support, you have technology, etc., and allows you immediate access through those mechanisms into a local market for the price of the franchise. Often, these can work well. Franchises don't make a ton of money unless you have a lot of them, but they make money, and so a lot of times people will do that. They'll open up, Jiffy Lube or something in France, and it somehow works. It's not gonna, but make you a ton of money, but it's not bad. It's better than doing a lot of other things. So that's those. The key thing to think about, again, summarize: wholly owned is you own it, you have it, you control it. Acquisition, you get it quicker. Joint venture, the other thing I really want, I maybe didn't say on joint venture. On a joint venture is a joint venture. So if you have a highly tech-based or proprietary information or something that's your intellectual property, you're going to have to share that with your joint venture partner. The thing about is that the smartest thing to do. If I share, and look at what happened to Apple in China, etc. There are plenty of companies in China that are producing exact Apple phones because they've stolen the technology and they make the same thing. So you create your own competitor when you do joint ventures. So it's key to know. And then you have the agent distributor rep house, good first step, low cost, and the licensed franchisee, which can work really well by taking the brand and the benefits and the global awareness of certain companies and implementing them into a new market. The last little quick thing I'm going to say is on corporate tax rates. Up until 2019, the United States had about the fourth highest corporate tax income in the world, and the highest among industrialized countries at almost 40%. It was really, really high, and it created a competitive disadvantage globally. Now, after the tax cut, tax change in 2019, the U.S. corporate tax rate is about 21%. That's a huge difference. So even though you might have one political view or other for whatever reason, the fact is that there are much less incentive to move your company overseas just for tax saving. If you think about it, if you're paying 40% in the States and 18% somewhere else, it only takes 4 or 5 years before you've made a gigantic doubling of your revenue by just being physically located somewhere else. And a lot of companies, you see so many companies being pushed to do things overseas, labor costs, etc., but also the tax rate. It just wasn't it was not competitive globally. Again, say what you will or whatever you think about the political situation in the States, but the fact is it was unheard of for an industrialized country like the United States to have a 40% corporate tax rate, and now it's much more in line with other countries around the world. Okay, I hope that helps. I hope you enjoyed that one, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks.